Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. Okay, let me bring up your bio again here. Welcome back, everyone, to the podcast. I am so excited to have one of my dearest friends here, Angela Dechaine. Angela is a mother, an innate postpartum care certified practitioner, biodynamic craniosacral therapist, and a certified biodynamic craniosacral therapist teacher. She deeply trusts the intelligence of the body and the capacity to prepare for healing. She works with the bodies in a holistic way that honors the uniqueness of the anatomy, physiology, nervous system, and physio-spiritual emotional experience. She is committed to supporting humans to remember the truth of who they are and their integral place in the universe through her work. I am so excited to have you on here for so many reasons. And maybe just a backstory for some of our listeners. So Angela and I have been friends for years, or at least I've known her for over a decade. But she was originally a high school friend of my husband's, and they were close friends. And so I've known her ever since I met my husband, which was over 13 years ago. But we only deeply connected 3 years ago. Like, that's when our relationship kind of like a boom into a whole new way. And it was through my dog getting injured with a severe back injury where she was paralyzed. And I had Angela come over and do craniosacral therapy on her to hopefully help heal her back, which it did. It worked in the end. But it was through that all of a sudden we started talking about the work I was doing with the menstrual cycle. And then Angela was like, I need to know more. And ever since then, she is no longer my husband's friend. She is my friend. So whenever I talk to Lee about you, I'm always like, so my friend Angela and I had a conversation today. So welcome, Angela. I'm so excited to have you on here. You are such an inspiring woman. Like you, I know that I think this is why we connect so deeply on so many different levels, is that we understand each other. We use our cycle rhythms to really deepen our relationship, which I think is beautiful. And it's so many women I wish would use this for their friendships. But I know for myself, I use you as an inspiration when I go into panic attacks or fears around my health, my body, just because you really are that pillar of somebody who learned how to trust their body and went with it and found the tools and the resources and did what was right for her, right? That you never got pigeonholed by anyone, whether it was a holistic path or whether it was the conventional medical path. You've always, done what was best for you and really tuned into your body. And that's what you really teach your people. And I really, really love it. So welcome.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction and the giggles. And, I could reflect that right back at you in the sense of like your integrity in terms of supporting your body in alignment with your internal compass and just really understanding that our bodies are so much more than what we are told that they are. And that this is really a skill set to have this internal compass and the ability to connect to it and listen to it and follow it. And it does, I've learned, take courage to do that, because one of the things that was reflected to me during my, we could say, health crisis or cancer experience was that people would continuously say, you're so courageous to do something different than what the doctors are telling you to do. And that was confusing to me because I had the narcissistic viewpoint that doesn't everybody see the world this way? And then it was continuously reflected to me that this was a skill. And so not only did I do that for my own health and well-being, but there was medicine in that experience because it taught me about something that humans have and it can be developed. And so not everybody wants to do yoga and not everybody wants to do conscious dance, which are other things that I practice and also facilitate. But people can come and they can receive care. They can come and they can receive craniosacral therapy. And it's a portal into helping people feel their bodies from the inside with some guidance, because I'm tracking the sensations and the rhythms alongside them. And pretty much like a guide in the wilderness, just saying, hey, can you pay attention? Instead of saying, you know, there's a bird over here, or pay attention to that landscape, I can say, can you pay attention to this area of your body? And just guide them into their felt sense so that it's something that's not so scary, and they're not alone. And there's this feedback system where I'm saying, yeah, that's really real. And this is what helps people connect to their felt sense, which essentially I think is the skill set that we need to follow our own internal compass.
Right. So let's get into a little bit about your health crisis, which landed right around the time that Lee and I were getting married. Right at our wedding is when you kind of found out. So do you want to tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the story has changed so much, and I think there's been a lot of integration around it. The thing that I see when we hear the word cancer is that it's a real scary word. It's a real scary diagnosis. But I think that's also what made me different, was instead of going to the point of flipping out, and of course I had those moments, but my first response is, what's going on here? Like, what's actually happening in my body? And so when you have cancer, you have a tumor. And then I started asking the questions like, what's a tumor and why did it form? And the more I explored that and went into the inquiry, it led me, again, this internal compass led me in a direction of seeking truth. And I think even being a yogi, and potentially even just women, we are truth seekers. We want to know what's real, because we do walk that line between the seen and unseen. I just really wanted to understand what's going on here. And then that's what helped me make my choices. And I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer in 2013 at the very beginning of that year. And triple negative breast cancer has a poor prognosis because it's not, it doesn't have any relationship to your hormones. And because it doesn't have a relationship to that, at that time, things may have changed. But in conventional medicine, there wasn't any chemotherapy that had been developed specifically for that. And that's normally the conventional pathway, is a type of chemotherapy to rid your body of these cells that have invaded you. Well, that actually is not correct either. Cancer is developed by your body. It's not something that invades you. And so if we understand that our body created it, we can also understand that our body has the potential to stop creating it and to start to repair. And so I was just asking the questions like, why did a tumor have to form in my body? Why did it form in my breast? Does it have a relationship to any of this psycho-spiritual, emotional realms? And so rather than just looking at physiology, I was also looking at all of the factors that make us humans. And there were a lot of things that actually contributed to why a tumor needed to form in my breast. And the long story short is that it was there as a wake-up call. It was there to say, you need to pay attention. And it was also there to ask, like, there are parts of you that want to leave the planet. So basically decide, do you want to be here or do you want to leave? You can't be on the fence anymore. And it took a couple of months to get to that point of really understanding that part. But I think the part that was courageous, perhaps, is to even just ask myself that question, was, are there parts of you that want to leave the planet? Am I willing to see them, feel them, look at them, listen to them? Am I willing to make a choice? And so that was probably the most pivotal part of my healing, was coming to that understanding, was that I did want to be on the planet, that there were parts of me that wanted to leave. And the parts that wanted to leave were the parts that were trying to get me to engage with life at the level with which I engage with life right now. And so I feel like the work that I found, the craniosacral therapy, especially the biodynamic paradigm, I have the privilege and the honor of holding life in my hands every day when I do my work. I have this really deep relationship with the animating forces that bring life into form. And these are essentially the forces that build us, create us, and they're the same forces that restore and repair and regenerate us. And so it was just a real beautiful ending to the person that I was, that was kind of between worlds, into a person that decided to really be here and really be alive. And I think that influences how I am in the world and how people respond to me. because I've been told this isn't necessarily familiar or common.
Right. And I would agree with that. It is not. I think we as humans are trained to really live and to respond to fear, right? If you look at a lot of our systems that are set up in the world, it is to create a fear response in us. And that fear response impacts our nervous system. It impacts our health. It impacts so many layers of who we are. So
yeah,
cancer is no different. It definitely, I know for me that, and we've talked about this one-on-one, of like that fear of getting cancer and feeling like that's it, like my chances of being here, or like I go right into that like worst case scenario place. And it's really interesting that like you felt like this was a wake up call for you, because similar, but not similar in my story, was of having several ectopic pregnancies, then from there having an incompetent cervix with all my pregnancies. I remember finally, for the first time in my life, going to see a naturopath after my second daughter was born, and she was born at 30 weeks, going, okay, so I deeply want to work with somebody who can help me figure out what's going on with my body, of me understanding where my blocks are psychologically, whatever it is. Like there is something in my story that's disrupting my health, because everything that's happening to me in my health is all around my cervix, right? All around my womb space, from the blocked tubes to the incompetent cervix to the premature births to having abnormal cancer or abnormal cells on my pap and having to go for a LEEP procedure. Like it just, everything kept bringing me back to my womb space. And I think that was like the beginning of my healing journey, of just like, there was just so many things that kept hitting me on the side of the head going, if you're not going to listen, I'm going to flare it up another way. Right. And so me seeking help was like, I need to figure out my health. I need to figure out what it is that has blocked me here, because it's just going to keep reoccurring. And I remember my exact words to the naturopath were, if I don't start working on this, it's going to turn into cervical cancer. Like I have no doubt in my mind that if I don't start working on this, the only other place my body can go to now at this point, with all these flags that it's thrown up in the air, is this. And so that was kind of my wake up call. So although I haven't had cervical cancer, it is that thing that still marinates in the back of my head every now and then when I get like odd cramps that I normally don't have. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on with my cervix? And so it's like calming myself down and reminding myself that it's something in my environment, something within me, that I can make choices in my health.
yeah. And I think, in our modern way of living, one, it doesn't actually align with our physiology. And so just to be in this type of world at this time is activating to our nervous system. And our nervous system, if it's dysregulated, it can impact our whole physical form, our endocrine system, our immune system, and so on and so forth. And so, not from a place of victim of just saying, well, I live in this world and it's shit, so therefore I'm screwed. It's just being really objective about like, what am I working with here? And then how can I take steps in a direction that put me more in alignment with my physiology in a way that is uplifting and bolstering and fostering of health, versus the opposite direction. The part that I love about your story is what I would call a knowing, that you just, there was that moment where you're like, if I don't do something to this, this is going to get worse. This is going to turn into cancer. And so there's just this knowingness in the system. And this is essentially how our bodies do talk to us, or our soul within our body talks to us, is there's this deep felt sense, this knowing that comes through our physical form. It's not a mental thing. It's like an embodied feeling that I just know. And this is very real, this knowingness. My story around knowing was the very first night when I found the lump. It was close to midnight, and I was going to rush off to the hospital to get some diagnostics. And my husband's like, nobody's going to be there. Like, just try to rest and go in the morning. And so I was forced to pause and to just feel into what's happening. And that was the question that I asked, what's really going on here? And I just sat and held my body and listened. And then the first knowingness, or the first question that came up, was this thought, like, why do you want to die, Ange? That was the very first thought. And when I reflect on that, I was like, this was a really important moment. And so I just sat with that, and I was like, in my body, in my bones, I knew I wanted to be here. And then that's when I made the commitment. If there's a part of me that wants to leave, I'm willing to see you, hear you, feel you, whatever needs to be done to make that connection. And then the next wave or the next thought that came in, or the feeling that came in, was, what if it is your time to die? What if it actually is your exit point? And I sat with that, and I actually felt really safe. I know that death isn't an ending. And the part that was difficult about that was thinking about, how am I going to help my family and my community be okay with this? Yeah. And then the next thought was devastation that I hadn't had a child yet. And I fell asleep in tears. And that moment of pausing and feeling and asking and listening is what gave me what I called like my North Stars, or my alignments that I was going to follow in order to make my choices. So the first one was life. I want to be alive. So it was anything that had an effect on supporting life, that would be something that would be able for me to be able to say, yes, that's what I want. And then the next one was about dying and feeling really safe. And so the next one was trust and faith, that I could really lean hard into the experiences that I've had, that there's more to this life than just the physical reality. And part of that was also knowing that I was deeply supported. And then the third alignment, it took a little bit of time to get it narrowed down. At first, it was fertility. It was anything that would support fertility. And then it shifted into vitality, that it wasn't just about fertility. And this is the one time in our relationship where my husband challenged me in a way that was so helpful. And I think it was the beginning of a shift in our relationship, where I was like, fertility, fertility, fertility. And he said, kind of tongue in cheek, where he's like, you can't have a baby if you're dead. And I was like, you're right. I need to focus on vitality, like life, trust, and vitality. And so those gave me the characteristics or the qualities that I needed to have in order to be able to make my choices. And so the choices that I made were not conventional therapies. They were alternative therapies. And they were an integrative therapy between naturopathic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, and also cutting edge cancer care. And so I did do a type of chemotherapy, but the part that made it cutting edge was it was a personalized plan based on the tumor cells that had been cultured out of my blood and then tested. So we knew what agents would work. And then the way that that medicine was applied was also applied intelligently using insulin. And it's called insulin potentiated low dose chemotherapy. So the amount of chemotherapy agent that I would take is 10% of what's conventionally given. And so that really did support vitality and life in my system. The whole point of telling that story is just there was this knowingness that guided me. And I feel like if I want to like lean into why I love you and why I love the work that you do, is again, connecting with our blood, connecting with our bodies, connecting with our cycles. This is one portal or avenue into embodiment and tapping into this true embodied wisdom, or this internal compass that can guide us.
Right. So let's go into that. So you, from this experience of having cancer, at the time, you weren't doing the work that you're doing now.
No.
You are in a totally different field.
Yeah. I mean, the short story there is that I went to California for my treatments. And when I came back, I went into this completely numb, disengaged state. And it was really confusing to me because I was like, I just spent all of this time and energy and effort to save my life. And now I can't even engage with it. And I had an idea that it was nervous system, but I didn't know anything about nervous system. And nervous system wasn't as sexy or savvy as it is now, like in social media and just like in the culture where people are talking about it, which is wonderful. So I went and saw a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. And I also had gone to see this person because they were also part of the body intelligence training, which is the foundations training that I took. And I was curious about it because I felt like, you know, people were telling me, how are you doing this? I'm like, why don't you have an internal compass? You know, and I was like, I want to help people. And I think it's body work. And so I just kept getting smacked in the face with these advertisements for body intelligence trainings. And so I went to see this person, one, because I thought it would be helpful for my nervous system. And two, I was curious about the training and I wanted to feel it. And after that first session, I was so different. I was much more grounded. My nervous system was out of that freeze, shocky state, that overwhelmed state. I learned so much in one session about like how much I was embodied and how much I was dissociated. And it was a game changer. And so I went to the intro session, and when they started talking about embryology and how we form creates our rhythms, and that these rhythms are what restore us and uphold our health, and that health is available no matter what your diagnosis or your symptomology is that health is actually keeping you alive. I was really inspired. And so I jumped right into it. And so that's how I've come to the work that I do now, is that I feel like the craniosacral therapy was a huge piece in helping my nervous system integrate the overwhelm of the cancer experience.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, from your cancer experience, you've went into this body dynamic craniosacral therapy as a practitioner, which you rescued my dog. You've rescued me many times, and I love your work. And then from there, that's when you and I started to really start to talk deep about my work. And by then you'd already had your son. You had already had your son and gone through your postpartum journey. And you were in this new phase of kind of discovering yourself. I would say both for motherhood, but also for transitioning into perimenopause or whatever this next layer of you was going to be. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we started to really talk about, like, because you were really, really curious about your body. Do you want to go into a bit about like what that was that encouraged you or that made you want to reach out about womb work and understanding your hormones?
Yeah, I mean, the way that you put it is quite lovely, but I think at the time I was like, I don't know what's going on. I'm losing my mind, and I'm losing it on my husband and my family, and this is not okay. And I don't feel like I'm like, myself. And I'm sure it has something to do with my cycles. And, Kate, I know you do this stuff, and all the stuff that you told me is so intriguing. Like, can I just sit in the red tent with you? I just want an elder. And you were like, yeah, I can't wait to talk to you about this stuff. I mean, that makes me emotional to have another woman say, yeah, I can't wait to talk to you about this stuff, because in our generation, I don't think that we had that, right? Mm-hmm. It was something that was hidden, or you did it yourself, or it wasn't celebrated, or it was something that was dirty. Like, there was so much that came up when I started chatting with you. And that was really the ignition of this really big journey of like reclaiming my body, reclaiming my blood. And it's so fascinating. Like, at that time, I would be dreading my luteal phase, or like, right, the PMS time. And I love that I can be like, that's my luteal phase. And I'm so excited about my luteal phase. And I actually look forward to bleeding now, because it's so regenerative for my system to lean into winter, lean into rest. And I'm sure I'm like, the student has become like the protege kind of thing, where I'm just like, this is so important because it's life-changing. And to talk about it with my men, like to talk about it with my husband, and to talk about it with my son. And my son is curious about the blood, and he comes into the bathroom because we have an open home and we have a naked home and all of the things. And so there's really big healing that's happening, not just on the level of my own personal physiology and my body and my soul, but this is like generational healing also, generations behind and generations going forward. So it's big stuff. And it seems really simple, but to be able to just be excited about what your body's communicating to you and to look at it that way. I mean, I think the part that was so wonderful was, one, you said yes. You're like, yes, I want to be your elder, and I'm excited about this. And two, I want to connect with you on this, and I want to hold your hand as we walk through this together. And that nothing that we talk about is off the table, and everything that we talk about is celebrated. Like, I don't know a lot of women in my life that are wanting to have those types of conversations. Mm-hmm. And I think it's rising. I think women are starting to come to a point where more and more women are talking about this, and there is this cultural shift. And so, you definitely, in the way that you are and the way that you talk about things, are supporting this shift in culture. And so this, not only did it help me with my own body, but it really informs my work. And now it's in this place where I want to contribute to culture as well. I want to contribute to, I don't know what you would call it, but I mean, a culture that really exalts women in their cycles, and a culture that really exalts the mother, right? The life-giving capacity of women. And so this is something that has become really a passion project for me. And so I don't know what this was 2 or 3 years ago now. And my whole life is different. because these things that are so important to the feminine form, the female body, the mother. I'm a mother myself, and so it's just so important. And it's so important, like, because even you use the word like, because I think I used that word. I was like, I don't know if this is perimenopause or what the hell is going on. But it was actually just a big disconnection. Now that I have a relationship with my cycle is pretty normal. And I've been able to repair my cycle from a short cycle of 24 days to 27 days. That's miraculous to me. And it's not surprising because I believe that the body can heal. And I know that I'm not actually in perimenopause yet. And just like, you know, there can be a charge around the word cancer if we don't understand it. There is a charge around perimenopause, but the reason that there's a charge is because there's so much grief that I missed out on this, that this celebration of my body and this deep love for every single moment of my cycle, that I feel like I have a short amount of time to celebrate it now before it changes. And I'm okay with the change, but it just, you don't realize how much you've lost until you've lost it.
And you're not the only one that says that. You know, so many women I work with are always like, how am I just learning about this now in my 40s? Like, I feel like I lost out on a lifetime of knowing me to live my full life because I just didn't know this. And I think that's that's the catalyst that like fires me up of like, this has got to change. Like, I know there's women out there that are doing the work, but I really want to be part of that impact of helping women come home to themselves before you're in that transition and you're like, where did the time go?
Yeah.
Let's be real. Juggling all the to-dos and the expectations in the modern world can be downright overwhelming for any woman. High demand jobs, managing a home, tending to our children, and trying to nurture our relationships while still tending to our own needs can feel like a tall mountain to climb. But what if there were hacks? Simpler ways to manage your life while still deeply tending to who you are. Drumroll, please. Introducing the menstrual cycle. Your menstrual cycle and your womb wisdom hold valuable information on how to align your life so that you can reduce your stress, kicking burnout to the curb and giving you the tool to organize your life according to the energy of your hormones. January 28th, I will be hosting a very special masterclass called Burnout to Balance, where I will teach you how to tap into the wisdom and transform your life. It is time to say bye-bye to the modern burnt-out woman and hello to the modern wise one. To register for this free event, click on the link in the show notes below.
And there's so much that can be said about, like, the whole point of getting my cycle to come back to a longer luteal phase is that I understand that the longer your luteal phase, the healthier your hormone system is. And, you know, and there's other things that I'm exploring and repairing in my system from birth and just like a lifetime of yoga and, you know, all of these things that have impacted, let's just say, my pelvis. But to do the repair work now before I hit menopause is going to allow my menopause time, the pre and the post, to have some ease. Because when these things are running in the background and estrogen is just like really, you know, uplifting and holding things, when that starts to disappear, that's when women are really start to have some severe symptomology.
Yeah. It's just fascinating. I just think it's so amazing of what we do not know and not what we can. And, you know, I just want to go back a little bit because like you talked a lot about how me providing this information was so changing for you, but it was also like a game changer for me. Cause I think you were the first person that was like, okay, I really want to get to know this. And I really want someone who can be intimate with it. So up until that point, I was just this teacher. I was just, you know, putting out the courses or talking to women about it. But you were the first person in my inner circle that, and this was a big challenge for me, first person in my inner circle that was like, I want you to talk about this and then let's integrate this into our relationship. Because no one else in my intimate circle, friends, family, or anyone were like, they were all like, I don't want to know about the work that you do.
And then like when we started talking about this, I'm like, how are we not friends? Like closer than this? Like, I don't understand how this didn't come to the surface till now.
And it's like so beautiful. And this is like, I think your experience of asking the questions and me being able to help bring you to this experience that you're having, what's been so helpful for me is that it's opened a door in a relationship that has grown because of my cycle. right? And so it's not because all of a sudden we had something to jam out on. It's because now I have somebody who, like, if you text me and I'm on like the first day of my period, I have no concern whatsoever saying, Ange, I can't talk today. Like, I'm bleeding. It's day one of winter.
Yeah.
And you are like, gotcha. Talk to you in a week. And that, to me, like, that is sisterhood. That's only what I can imagine what it was like hundreds of years ago, where women just held the space for women wherever they're at, and vice versa. I've received texts from you where you're like, I'm deep in my inner fall and my head's spiraling, Kate. Like, I need someone to help me through this. And I'm like, yeah, call me. Let's talk about it. But we meet each other on the basis, like, with the words that we use and the way that we hold each other is very seasonal with our cycles. And I think it's so beautiful. Like, the Ange that I get in my spring is very different than the Ange that I get when I'm bleeding. And it's exactly the medicine that I need, right? Like, I have somebody who's adaptable and who really knows me and understands me. And even though it may not, even it may be your head, you're like, I don't actually understand you. I just understand your rhythm. And so I'm just giving you what I would want, but that's exactly what I need. Right. And so it's so beautiful that we have that relationship. And I love it. And I love that both of our husbands are fully aware of our cycles. I will never forget the supper that we had that you threw for me for my birthday. And you're like, so I'm in my inner summer tonight. Right away, your husband was like, okay, I know what that means. And like, there was no shame of saying it in front of Lee. Like, he knew what we were talking about. It was like, I love that our cycle talk just weaves into like dinner talk. And our partners are like, okay, so pass the broccoli, please.
But I think even in that, like, even when you shared that you openly talked about this with your husband and the benefits of that, like, it really gave me, it just opened a door for me to see that this isn't just about me, that even from a nervous system perspective, what's happening in each, like, in the family, we can have our own nervous systems, but then our nervous systems are constantly in relationship to our people, especially our people that we're close with. And so, you know, it's like the weakest link. If mine is in a dysregulated state, it's going to impact everyone. So it's not only really important for me to do that, but as a person that's a part of a family unit, it's really important for me to take care of myself, to center my care so that I can be a partner and a mother, but also that the people that are part of my circle just have, you know, not responsibility, but they have an awareness of what's going on. So I can just say, you know, with my son, the big thing is swimming right now. He wants to go to the pool together. And when I'm bleeding, I don't go in cold water. I want to keep my room warm. And so I just say to my son, I can't go swimming right now because I'm bleeding, but we can swim in, you know, 3 days. Right. And then I make the promise and then we go. And instead of him getting upset, he's like, okay, like, it's just, okay.
Yeah.
And that's the same with my husband. Like, when I get really close to my bleed, like day 26, 27, bedtime in our house is something that he just takes over because I just need to go lay down and be in quiet, and he gets it, and it's easy. And so I think there's benefit. I mean, it would be lovely to have our men on the podcast and have them talk about their experience with this. I think at first he was like, why are you telling me this? And I was just like, this is new for me, and this is really scary for me to talk about this, but I think it's going to be okay if you have a better idea about who I am and which woman I am, right? Like, I love your joke where, you know, you're not married to one woman, you're married to 4. And if you can figure out which one it is today, then you know, what she likes and what she doesn't like.
Yeah.
And this is good for everyone.
It's so true. It's so funny because I'm working on writing a sales page right now for a new program that I'm launching. And I couldn't find the words. Like, I was in my winter, so my vocabulary was shot. And I was like, I need to get this done. And so it's like, Lee, give me the vocabulary. This is what I'm trying to say. And he's like, you're putting too many words in it. Like, you're just say, you make life easy for everybody when you know your cycle. But that's not the words I'm looking for. So, but it was really interesting to hear him in that moment of, rather than being in this analytical mind of like actually trying to find the word that I wanted, he was just like, periods just make life simple. Like, your hormones make life simple. Like, you just let me know what I need to do. But yeah. So this work, cancer, then you went into your biodynamic craniosacral therapy. But then there was another big shift that happened for you in this, as we started to work together and as you started to go down this journey of just reconnecting with yourself and really starting to, I want to call it like Cancer 2.0, because cancer was like the first like eye opener of like, what is going on here? Like, what is the story, right? And then when you started working with your womb, it was like a new story that you were now starting to work on. And it's one that you're currently still trying to navigate and work through, of motherhood and of postpartum, which has led you now to become trained in the innate traditions as well. And that, I don't want to say your whole focus, but a big part of your focus of your work now is working with new mothers and supporting them through their postpartum. Do you want to go into a little bit about this work that you're doing with innate traditions and your journey of getting there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still parts of this that are integrating, because when I go back to like what was the moment that brought me to the innate traditions training, was I joined a mother circle from another practitioner that's a mentor of mine in my conscious dance circle. And she was having a women's circle, and I attended the women's circle because I wanted to support her work. And I was curious because now I was like really leaning hard into being a woman, and then I have a uterus, and then I have a womb space, and then I can have a connection with my blood and my cycles. And so I was just really curious. And when I joined the circle and I listened to the women speaking, it was a lot of women talking about their postpartum experiences and how it impacted them. And I had an emotional response, and I had a charge in my system. And I thought that was really interesting. And then I started noticing when I was working with families, like when mothers would bring their infants in for craniosacral therapy, and they would talk about their birth story, and they would talk about some of their postpartum stuff, there was a charge in my nervous system. And I was like, oh, there's something here that needs to be tended to. And so then I started looking at the Innate Traditions website and their offerings. I attended another couple of those mother circles. And again, there was just this really deep calling, like, I need to do this training. And it's not that I need to do the training because I want my work to go in this direction. It was that there is something deep here that needs some healing and language and holding and women. And it felt like this was it. And so I entered into the training first for my own healing of my postpartum time that was challenging. And then two was that if there was a way that it impacted my work, I was open to that. And again, this training was life-changing. Like the healing that I went through in relationship to my physical form, my pelvic diaphragm, my cervix, my womb, even the structure of my pelvis, my belly, my gut, my brain, really understanding how pregnancy and birth and postpartum are these times where our physiology is changing in really big and beautiful ways. And then also how this can create a vulnerable state in our system. It also led me into understanding pre and perinatal psychology, so that when women are pregnant and they're starting to expand, and they literally start to expand between their cells, this gives an opportunity for anything that is held somatically to start to come to the surface. And a lot of times this can be our own birth, like the way that we arrived in the world as a human. And then also it can be our early experiences can start to come to the surface. And so there was a ton of healing in that, about like how I was born, how I entered into the world, why that impacted my pregnancy and the choices that I made in order to birth my son, and then why my postpartum time was so challenging. The short of it for my postpartum time was, one, I was going through this ending of the maiden and the beginning of the mother. And so there's really this death that happens along with birth. And I wasn't really prepared for that, even just having the knowledge of that. And then again, just the holding an infant in my arms and having him go through the attachment and the bonding with the skin to skin. These were things that I didn't have as an infant. And so my whole system was like reprocessing. And so it was just a lot coming to the surface, and then not having any support, and not from a victim place, because I actively created that myself. I'm like, I can handle this. Motherhood, I'm told that motherhood is instinctual, and I'm an instinctual being. But yes, that's true. And you also need a nest, and you also need a tree or a support system that's holding you up, so that you can lean into this time that is a huge time of transition. And so what that looks like is not only, the day-to-day realities of having someone to tend to you and helping you eat and helping you sleep, and helping you take care of this little one and take care of yourself. It's really having the wise woman. We really need other women that we trust in our circle that can come and just be there with us as we fall apart, and then we're rewoven together in this new way. And I didn't have that because I didn't set that up for myself, because I didn't know. right? And so now when I do my work and I have women that are in their conception journey, or they're in their pregnancy, or they're in their, preparing for birth or their postpartum time, these are all places where I've actively gone through the healing and a lot of research and exploration and inquiry around it. And so it's really meaningful to me to be the person that is willing to just sit there and listen to you, no matter what it is that you're chatting about, to walk with you, hold your hand, and then provide little tidbits or seeds of wisdom that helps point them in the direction of upliftment and ease and connection with their bodies, and the beauty of life and what's really happening. I don't know if that really answers the question, but the innate traditions was something that was so deeply healing for me. I think it was a bigger healing than actually going through the cancer experience. I think the cancer experience actually prepared me to do the healing that innate traditions took me through, because it was just so many layers of being a woman and a mother and having a female body, and how the female physiology is different, and how do we honor that and exalt that and tend to that in a way that is in alignment with what we really need. And so the innate traditions is understanding the physiological needs of women and infants in the immediate postpartum time. So the first 40 days, or sometimes that's longer. Like I have mothers that I still tend to within like the 9 months. So we have our internal gestation where the little one is growing within our bodies. And then we have the external gestation where they're dependent on the mother as their caregiver for regulation of their warmth, for regulation of their emotions, their nervous system, and just like nutrition, all of the things, until that little infant can start moving away from the mother. And that's about another 9 months. And so I do have mothers in my circle that I tend to, where what that looks like is I do home visits. Instead of them coming out, it's bringing the community, bringing the care to them and holding them and their infants and supporting their nervous systems as this constellation, like I was talking about, where, our little ones grow inside of us. They are so attuned to our nervous system. And our culture talks about how mothers, like, they're responsible for everything. So you better be perfect because you're going to fuck up your kid. And that's not it at all. Excuse my language. But there's obviously a charge behind that message. But we have to look, it's not a fault thing. It's a physiology thing. If we're just really objective, our little ones grow inside us. They are so attuned to our nervous system. We must exalt and hold and uplift and tend to the mother, so that if mothers are well, then children will be well. And it's not this because mothers need to be well so that their children can be well. I think there was a post that I read. It was like, I don't want a full cup so that I can pour it into everybody else. I want a full cup so that I can be in a place where I can be deeply engaged with life and who I am. And the benefit of that is that I'm a good partner and a good mother, right? Yeah, I think the fire is starting to come out a little bit, but it's work that I really deeply love, is being able to support women and their families this way. And a lot of times too, it's tending to their men. Like fathers are going through a really big journey also, especially if it's their first little one. Not only do they become a caregiver of one dependent, but they become a caregiver of two newborns, a newborn baby and a newborn mother. And that's a big deal for men, and men don't have these circles. And I hope that, as women come together, we start to realize this, and then we can start to engage and support our men to find what it is that they need. And as humans, we need relationships that hold us and lift us and take care of us.
Yeah. And I think that's where we struggle right now in this world, is the lack of community, right? And so in many ways, I feel like it's an uprising of, whether you want to say coaching or holistic services or like this new way of doing things. I think the attraction behind it is because a lot of these services, a lot of these offerings are community based, right? It is about knowing that you're not going in it alone. You're not going in it and just doing a self-study and never communicating with anybody, which is kind of how we live through motherhood, is just trial and error and don't tell anyone that we screwed up, right? And I feel like that is what is going to heal us, is knowing that we can be raw, we can be our true selves, we can be vulnerable with our community.
And our community doesn't have to be this like ideal of like a whole bunch of people in the circle, right? My community of women that I know have me, there's probably 4 women that I can lean hard on, maybe 5. And that's pretty great. I mean, we have our community in like our farming community, and these are all people that, again, I know I can lean into them when we need help and support. But when it comes to this type of work of like, what's going on for you, what's really real for you, how can I support you? Someone that's just going to show up and bring you food or come do body work or whatever, right? Like that's my service. I will offer that because it's my skill set, right? If someone's like, I've done this for you, where it's like, can I come in, give you craniosacral therapy? Yes, and I'll pay you. No, I'm offering this as a gift because you are my friend and you're in need, and this is my skill set. It is different in those types of circumstances, right? And so I feel really honored and privileged to be able to do that in certain times where it's like, can, find childcare, talk to my husband, I need to go, I'm going to go tend to my community, because when we're all well, there's this reciprocity that happens, and that's how we take care of each other, right?
Yeah.
So I think we learn that community can be anything you want it to be, but just lean hard into what you have, and then that will give you the insight about what's lacking. And then you can start to cultivate that together or start orienting to what else you need. And so in my community, there are some deep friends that I can lean into and be vulnerable with and reach out to. And then in my community, I would also say that those are the practitioners that I pay, that I know they have the skill set that I need. And so we can talk about that, like in the postpartum time of creating your postpartum plan or your postpartum like nest and net, is that it's like, who are the people that you want in here that are going to be tending to you, both paid and unpaid, right? That's our modern way of living.
Yeah. And this conversation has been so amazing. We hit a lot of topics. I know before we hit record on this, we were like, wow, there's all these different angles we can talk, and maybe we have to do more than one. And we crammed them all into one. So I was like, no, I want it all today. I want it all today. So I love that we touched on all these areas, because I think they're so important for women. And I think, maybe we didn't touch on this clear enough in this conversation, so maybe I'll just conclude with it, is that there is more than one way to do anything.
Yeah.
And your story, even though we may not have, like, we kind of wove it in, but like even your approach to cancer, it wasn't one way. You did the investigating, you figured out what was best for you, and you found that. And then the same with your cycle, like coming into your cycle and your cycle health. And then the same with postpartum care. There is no one way to do something. There is this curiosity that I think when we spark in women, that's when the true healing happens, is when we can get curious about what's happening and curious about what we can resource. Magic really can happen. Healing can really happen in very unconventional ways. And so anybody who's listening to this, that like one of the big takeaways that I would love for you to walk away with is just knowing that no matter where you're at, what you're going through, get curious, what's the word I'm looking for? Inquisitive of what's going on, what's the story within your body, the story of your history, the story of your ancestry. Like what might be this common thread that keeps weaving its way through. And then from there, try to find the resources that really fit you and your means and, your energy level, your capacity. And that's when healing and difference can happen. So thank you, Anna.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, get curious, start the inquiry, and there's not only one way to healing. There's many pathways, and whatever pathway that you're choosing is the one that's appropriate for you. So there is research that shows that if you are 100% on board with your treatment plans or your treatment protocols, that they're more effective than if you're not, right? It's just like really in this curious, tuned in place. It's like, what do I want? And it can really be anything you want it to be. And I mean, from your story to my story, and there are countless others where it's like anything can work. There was just one man that I learned about that he chose to heal his lymphoma by spending time in the woods. And his commitment was to spend 1 full day per week in the woods. And that improved his health in an immense way, that he is cancer-free. Like it can be anything you want it to be, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I read, it was probably about a year ago now, another story of, it was another man who, when he found out he had incurable cancer, locked himself in a hotel room for weeks on end and just watched funny movies, and his cancer cured. Like he just wanted to laugh. Like he just wanted rest and laugh. and he cured himself. So
yeah, I think the thing is like a lot of the messages that we get is that your body is broken, it's wrong, it's unfixable. And those messages are so dangerous. And I think that's a really big part of the work that I do is when you can feel your body starting to restore itself on the inside, not because I'm telling you that it's doing it, but you can feel the sensations of the body making internal adjustments. This gives people hope. It reframes their whole story from I am in a place where nothing's going to change to, oh my gosh, possibility, right? And so that's what gives hope. And so I really hope, from this conversation today that people can hear that it can be whatever you want it to be. I love that, right? Whatever you want, right?
Whatever you want.
That can seem a little overwhelming at the same time in the sense of like, well, I don't know what I want and I don't know what to do, right? So it's not necessarily that simple. But I think, I'm in a place right now where I'm also creating a course, and I had a colleague, I was talking about a certain aspect of it, and he's like, it can be anything you want it to be. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, anything you want it to be. And it just opened a door for me. It just took off limitation. So without it being too overwhelming, is that, there's more, surround yourself with people that have made changes in their life that was outside of the norm.
Yeah, I agree. So for anybody who is in the Edmonton, Alberta, Canada area, if you are looking for some body dynamic craniosacral therapy, Ange is definitely someone who I would highly recommend. All of her information is going to be in the show notes below. So you'll be able to find how to find her on Instagram, her website. Go check her out. Go check out her work. You're just beautiful. I love you. And I love being your friend. And I love how you came to me for growth and you ended up helping me grow. And so it's just been a really beautiful relationship. And I'm so glad that you got to come onto the podcast today and share your story and your wisdom with everyone that's listening. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I love you too.
Friends, have you had a chance to download my new free ebook? Maybe it's not you. The Truth on PMS and How You Can Take Back Control of Your Cycle is now available. This is truly a book that I think needs to be in the hands of every woman who struggles with the second half of their menstrual cycle. So if this is you, click on the link in the show notes and download your free copy today. And remember to subscribe to this podcast and share a review if you loved this episode. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living.